What if believing you're not good at something is the very reason you're not? Welcome back to the Grow Leap Academy podcast, where we decode the books that shape better lives. And today we're diving into a mindset shift that could literally change the way you see yourself, your abilities, and what's possible for your future. Carol Dweck's Mindset. The New Psychology of Success is more than a book. It's a wake-up call. Because the difference between thriving and struggling often comes down to one hidden belief. Do you think you can grow, or do you think you're stuck? This episode unpacks the science and stories behind the fixed versus growth mindset, shows how this affects your relationships, learning, leadership, and reveals how just shifting the way you think can shift your entire life. Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. We always try to get to the heart of how things work, and today we're tackling a big one. Mindset.
Mindset, yeah. It's kind of like you think you know who you are, right? But what if there's this hidden belief, like just below the surface, it's shaping everything?
It really is a hidden influencer, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, big time. And we're talking about how you approach relationships, your work, how much you think you can achieve. It's kind of crazy how much it impacts.
And that's exactly what Carol Dweck has been exploring for, decades.
Right. And her book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. Well, we've been diving deep into the Grow Leap Academy podcast, which features mindset, to really get a handle on this.
So we're using that podcast to dig into the book, and wow, it is packed with stuff that makes you go, wait, really?
I know, right? I had a bunch of those moments myself prepping for this. We're going to look at why some people just seem to nail it while others constantly hit these walls.
And we'll even get into how mindset plays out in those super close relationships, the ones that really matter.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because honestly, at the heart of it all is this one key difference. Are you fixed or are you growth? That's the question.
Fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
What was that first spark that got Dweck so interested in this whole idea of mindset?
So picture this. Dweck's watching these kids, right? They're working on these puzzles, some of them tricky. And the way they reacted was just, totally different.
Yeah, I remember reading about this. It's fascinating.
Right, so some kids hit a tough spot and they're like, bring it on, this is awesome, I'm going to learn so much.
And it's not just putting on a brave face. They genuinely meant it.
Totally, and that's the point, right, how you see that difficulty.
Oh.
Is it a threat or is it an opportunity? That's the core difference.
Huge difference. But meanwhile, other kids, same puzzle, they're shutting down. It's like the puzzle was personally attacking them.
You nailed it. And Dweck's thinking, hold on, is this just personality or is there something deeper going on here? And that right there was the first clue to this whole fixed versus growth thing.
The kids who were up for the challenge, they were showing those early signs of a growth mindset. But the ones who were struggling, they were leaning towards fixed.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's really break down what these mindsets mean. First up, fixed mindset. What's the core belief there?
Okay, so fixed mindset is like this. You believe your basic stuff, your smarts, your talents, even your personality, it's pretty much set. You're born with it, and that's that.
Carved in stone, as Dweck puts it.
Exactly. And so these folks, they're really worried about how other people judge them. They're super sensitive to how their abilities come across.
Because if you screw up, if you make a mistake, it's like proof that you're just not good enough, right?
Yeah, it's like a judgment on your whole self.
Right.
Now flip that around, and you've got the growth mindset. What's the key difference there?
Well, with growth mindset, you believe all those qualities, the smarts, the talents, they can grow. You can cultivate them, make them stronger.
It's like a muscle, you got to work it to make it grow.
And mistakes.
Yeah.
They're not a sign of failure. They're like feedback.
Exactly. They're like, okay, here's what I need to work on. You're not trying to prove you're already perfect. You're focused on getting better.
And these differences, they pop up early on, like we saw with those kids and the puzzles.
Yeah.
But Dweck also did this really cool study where she offered kids a choice between an easy puzzle they knew they'd ace or a tough one they'd learn from.
Oh, yeah, that one's classic. So the fixed mindset kids, they went for the easy puzzle almost every time. They didn't want to risk looking dumb.
Right. They were like, smart kids don't mess up, so why even try?
And some of them even said that straight up.
But the growth mindset kids, they were like, why would I waste time on something I already know?
They were all about that challenge. I want to figure this out. That's the excitement of growth.
It's like they were actually drawn to the things they didn't know yet. Okay, so it's clear that this whole mindset thing isn't just about puzzles in a lab.
Oh, no, not at all. It plays out in real life all the time. Like, there's this study at the University of Hong Kong, and it shows how mindset affects the choices we make.
Hong Kong, right? So everything there is in English academically.
Yep. So some of the students, they weren't totally fluent, which makes sense. And there was this optional English course they could take.
To help them get up to speed.
Exactly. So the students with a growth mindset, they were much more likely to sign up for that course.
It's out as a way to improve.
Totally. They're like, hey, I can get better at this. Awesome.
But the fixed mindset students,
Taking that course felt like admitting they weren't good enough. It was a threat to their ego.
so they avoided it, even though it could have helped them a lot. And this is where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because this mindset difference also impacts how we deal with setbacks.
Absolutely. Imagine this. You get a C+ on a midterm, or maybe a parking ticket, something not great, but not the end of the world.
For someone with a fixed mindset, that kind of thing can be devastating.
It's like, see, I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. It reinforces that fixed belief.
Dweck talks about people who completely withdraw after something like that, get super defensive, or just feel totally crushed.
It's like that C+ or that ticket isn't just an event. It's proof of who they are deep down. But now, picture someone with a growth mindset. How do they react?
Well, they're not dwelling on the failure. They're thinking, okay,
Mhm.
what can I learn from this? How can I do better next time?
Exactly. That C+ becomes a chance to figure out better study habits. That parking ticket, maybe they need to pay more attention to the signs. It's about problem solving, not self-punishment.
They're focused on the solution, not the problem. It's a completely different way of seeing things.
It really is.
And it's not just about, like, academic smarts, right? This applies to our personalities, too.
Oh, absolutely. Dweck talks about intelligence mindset and personality mindset. You might think your smarts can grow, but still believe your personality is fixed.
So you might be all about learning new things, but think, oh, I'm just shy. That's how I am.
Exactly. And that can create some real tension, especially in relationships.
Like, imagine you're trying to grow and evolve as a person, but your partner has this fixed view of who you are.
Dweck tells this story about a woman with a growth mindset who's married to a guy with a fixed mindset. Every time she tried to talk about things they could improve, he just felt attacked.
Like any suggestion was a personal insult.
Yeah. And she ended up spending all her time trying to reassure him and fix his ego instead of actually working on their relationship.
That sounds exhausting. It also makes it really hard to have honest conversations,
Yeah.
right? Because you're walking on eggshells all the time.
Totally. And this whole mindset thing, it doesn't stop at relationships. It plays out in leadership, in sports, in pretty much every area of life.
So let's talk about business leadership for a minute. You see this contrast between CEOs who are all about short-term gains and their own image, and those who are focused on building something that lasts.
Right. And Dweck actually calls out Albert Dunlap as a prime example of a fixed mindset CEO. He was obsessed with looking like a hero, boosting stock prices no matter what.
And he admitted to believing that abilities are fixed, so he had to prove he was superior.
It was all about him, all about looking good in the moment. Now, contrast that with leaders who are constantly trying to improve things, even if it means taking a hit in the short term.
They're not afraid to make tough decisions that might not be popular right away, but ultimately make the company stronger.
It's about the long game, building a foundation for real growth.
And speaking of growth, there's some really inspiring stories in Dweck's book about people who overcame huge challenges, people who absolutely embodied that growth mindset.
Oh yeah, like Miranda, the wrestler. Early on, she was basically told she was a joke, not good enough.
I can't even imagine hearing that.
But instead of letting it crush her, she used it as fuel. She had this incredible drive to prove everyone wrong.
And she did. She ended up winning an Olympic bronze medal.
And then, get this, she went to Yale Law School. Talk about not letting anything hold you back.
That's amazing. And then there's the incredible story of Christopher Reeve. I mean, what he went through.
That's a story of pure willpower. After his accident, the doctors were basically saying, that's it, you're paralyzed.
But Reeve refused to accept that.
He started this intense exercise program, even though some people thought he was in denial.
He was like, my body might be broken, but my mind isn't. I'm going to fight this.
And he actually started regaining some movement. It was a huge scientific breakthrough, and it shows what's possible when you believe in the power of growth, even when the odds are stacked against you.
It really makes you question what our limits actually are, you know? And it seems like fixed and growth mindsets thrive in very different environments.
They do. A fixed mindset loves a sure thing. Anything where they can feel smart or talented without breaking a sweat. But the minute it gets hard, they lose interest.
Like those pre-med students Dweck followed. The ones with a fixed mindset, their interest in chemistry tanked when the course got tougher.
Exactly. They started feeling inadequate, and that turned them off the subject.
But the students with a growth mindset, they were even more determined when things got challenging.
They loved it. They saw the difficulty as a sign that they were truly learning, pushing their boundaries.
It's like that saying, when they tell me I can't, it really gets me going.
It's so true. Challenges just fuel that fire. And this idea of valuing effort over natural talent, you can even see it in how some people choose their students.
Dweck talks about Marina Semyonova, the famous Russian dancer and teacher.
Oh yeah, she had a really interesting method. She wasn't just looking for natural talent. She was looking for how students responded to correction.
She wanted to see who could take feedback and use it to get better. That was her sign of potential.
It makes so much sense, especially in a field like ballet, because even if you're naturally gifted, you need that growth mindset to reach your full potential.
And on the flip side, we see how a fixed mindset, even when paired with talent, can lead to some pretty big downfalls.
Yeah, the story of Stephen Glass, the journalist who made up all those stories, it's a prime example. He was so terrified of not being seen as brilliant that he resorted to lying.
He couldn't handle the idea of not being perfect from the get-go.
He didn't allow himself the luxury of becoming, as Dweck puts it. He had to already be a star, and that pressure just destroyed him.
It's tragic, really. And this brings us to another point, which is how a fixed mindset makes even a single test score feel like it defines you.
That's because they see abilities as permanent, so that one score becomes a judgment on their whole identity.
It's like, I got a bad grade, therefore I'm stupid. There's no room for growth or change.
And this leads to those wildly different reactions to failure we were talking about earlier.
Like Jim Marshall, the football player who ran the wrong way for a touchdown. I mean, talk about a public mistake.
Oh yeah, but he didn't let it define him. He took responsibility, learned from it, and actually became a better player because of it.
He had that growth mindset. He was
Yeah.
like, okay, that sucked, but I'm going to figure out how to make sure it never happens again.
Exactly. Now, compare that with Bernard Louiseau, the chef who committed suicide after his restaurant lost points in a guide.
He was so devastated by the perceived failure that he took his own life. It's heartbreaking.
And it shows just how fragile your self-esteem can be when it's all tied up in external validation and this idea that you have to be perfect.
You're constantly afraid of being exposed as a fraud, and any little setback feels like the end of the world.
And this even plays out in everyday situations, like that fishing trip anecdote Dweck mentions.
Oh yeah, the husband, fixed mindset, gets all upset when he can't catch any fish, starts blaming the equipment, the weather, anything but himself.
And his wife, growth mindset, is just enjoying the challenge. She's like, this is fun. I'm learning something new.
Two totally different perspectives. And this mindset stuff even affects how people cope with depression.
Studies show that people with a growth mindset who feel depressed are more likely to take action. They look for solutions. They reach out for help.
They don't just give up and say, this is who I am, I'm stuck.
And this brings us to another big myth, the myth of the natural.
Like, we hear about these amazing athletes, these musical prodigies, and we think, oh, they were just born that way.
But when you look closer, even those folks, they put in a ton of work.
Michael Jordan, Babe Ruth, they were famous for their dedication to practice and constantly getting better.
And then you have someone like Billy Beane, who was incredibly talented, but really struggled because he couldn't handle failure.
He had all the natural ability, but he didn't have the mindset to go with it.
Right. So even extraordinary talent needs the right mindset to flourish. And when we talk about athletes, there's this concept of character.
That grit, that ability to push through when things get tough.
Exactly. And that's closely linked to growth mindset. Like the Boston Red Sox comeback against the Yankees in 2004. That was a team full of character.
Down 3-0, and they still found a way to win. Incredible.
And then you have Pedro Martinez, another amazing pitcher, but sometimes he just didn't have that same grit.
When things went wrong, he would kind of crumble.
It's like he relied too much on his natural talent and didn't develop that mental toughness to overcome setbacks.
So real champions, the ones who consistently perform at the highest level, they tend to have that growth mindset.
They don't give up when they face adversity, like Pete Sampras, Jackie Joyner Kersee, Billie Jean King, they all had those moments where they had to dig deep and push through.
And even John Wooden, the legendary coach, he defined success not by winning, but by giving your absolute best effort no matter what.
It's about the journey, the process of growth, not just the end result. And you see the opposite with golfers like Sergio Garcia.
He had all the potential, but he often struggled and blamed everyone else when things didn't go his way.
Classic fixed mindset. It's always someone else's fault, never a chance to look inward and improve.
And then you have John McEnroe, those famous outbursts on the court.
Later on, he admitted those were just a cover for his own insecurities.
He couldn't handle not being perfect, so he lashed out.
And contrast that with Michael Jordan, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time.
He was incredibly talented, but he always emphasized the team effort.
He was humble, he worked hard, and he never stopped trying to get better.
And even in individual sports, like Diana Nyad swimming from Cuba to Florida, there's always a team behind the scenes.
Exactly. It challenges this whole idea that some buddies are just the ones who win.
It's about giving your all, regardless of the outcome.
Like Isis Tillis's father told her, just go for it, baby. That's the spirit.
So let's shift gears and talk about how this all plays out in the business world.
Over the past few decades, there's been this trend of glorifying CEOs, making them out to be superheroes.
And that can be dangerous because it creates this fixed mindset, this pressure to always be perfect and in control.
And that can lead to some pretty bad behavior, like we saw with those corporate scandals.
CEOs focus more on their image than on actually running the company ethically.
Like Lee Iacocca, who could never get over being fired by Ford. He was so obsessed with proving himself that he made some short-sighted decisions at Chrysler.
He was stuck in that fixed mindset of needing to be the hero, the savior.
And then you have guys like Jerry Levin and Jeffrey Skilling, who were known for being really abusive to their employees.
They needed to feel superior, so they put others down.
It's all tied up in that fixed mindset.
And this can really damage relationships, both personal and professional.
Absolutely. When you have a fixed mindset in a relationship, you start seeing your partner's flaws as permanent.
And it breeds contempt and dissatisfaction. You're not working together to grow. You're just stuck in this cycle of blame.
Like Penelope, who Dweck talks about. She couldn't stay in a relationship because she was always finding fault with her partners.
She was looking for perfection, which doesn't exist.
Now, contrast that with Laura and James, who had a growth mindset in their relationship. They supported each other's goals, they worked through challenges together, and they helped each other become better people.
They saw the potential in each other and in their relationship. And that brings us to another important area, bullying.
Kids with a fixed mindset who are bullied often internalize that negativity. They start feeling worthless, like they deserve it.
It's like they take the bully's judgment and make it their own.
And tragically, in some cases, that can lead to violence, like with the Columbine shooters.
But kids with a growth mindset, they see bullying differently.
They see it as a problem with the bully, not with themselves.
And they often focus on trying to educate the bully or finding ways to resolve the situation.
They believe in the possibility of change, both for themselves and for the bully.
And this is where the role of parents, teachers, coaches, it's so crucial. They have a huge influence on shaping kids' mindsets.
Think about educators like Stan Davis, Haim Janot, Marva Collins, Aaron Gruel. They all found ways to foster growth mindsets in their students.
They emphasized hard work, they believed in their students' potential, and they created environments where learning and growing were valued above everything else. Let's say you've got a kid, Elizabeth, who's a gymnast, and she works really hard but doesn't win any ribbons at a competition. What's the fixed mindset parent going to do?
Oh, they'll probably say things like, you were the best anyway, those judges were unfair, or you're naturally talented, you'll win next time.
They're trying to protect her ego, but they're not helping her learn from the experience.
Exactly. But a growth mindset parent would focus on her effort, the skills she developed, what she learned from the competition.
They'd help her see the value in the journey, regardless of the outcome. And even something as simple as asking about schoolwork can be interpreted differently depending on the child's mindset.
Fixed mindset kids, they hear those questions as judgments on their intelligence. They're afraid of not being seen as smart.
But growth mindset kids, they see it as encouragement. Their parents are interested in their learning, not just their grades.
And even the little kids pick up on these things. Dweck talks about this kindergarten boy who role plays how his parents would react to him making a mistake in math.
The fixed mindset parent blames him, while the growth mindset parent helps them understand the mistake and learn from it.
Powerful stuff, right? And it shows how even seemingly small things can have a big impact on kids' mindsets.
And sometimes even positive labels like calling a kid gifted can backfire.
Dweck gives the example of Sandy, who was always told she was brilliant, but she became so afraid of not living up to that label that she stopped taking risks, stopped trying new things.
He was trapped in this need to always be perfect.
And it really held her back in the long run.
So it's not about pushing kids to be the best. It's about nurturing their love of learning and their belief in their own potential.
Like those great teachers we talked about, they focused on hard work, fundamentals, and guiding students on their unique paths.
They created environments where it was okay to make mistakes, to struggle, to grow.
And sometimes even successful people can have fixed mindsets in certain areas of their lives.
Dweck talks about this basketball coach who was really successful but had a fixed mindset about his own coaching abilities.
He saw every win as proof of his brilliance and every loss as a personal attack.
So even though he was winning, he wasn't really growing as a coach.
It's a good reminder that mindset isn't a one-time thing, it's an ongoing process.
So the big takeaway here is that understanding and embracing a growth mindset is essential, not just for success, but for living a fulfilling life.
It's about how we approach challenges, how we learn from our mistakes, how we connect with others.
It affects everything.
And the good news is, we can change our mindsets. The research shows that even short interventions can make a huge difference.
So think about your own mindset. Where do you tend to get stuck in that fixed way of thinking?
And how can you reframe those thoughts to be more growth-oriented?
Pick one specific situation and think about how you would approach it differently with a growth mindset.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. Keep working on it, keep learning, and keep growing.
So our final thought for you today is this. Imagine the possibilities that open up when you embrace a growth mindset. It's about unlocking your potential, not just in one area of your life, but in all of them.
It's about seeing challenges as opportunities, mistakes as feedback, and yourself as someone who is constantly evolving and becoming.
We encourage you to explore this idea further. Maybe dive into Dweck's book yourself and see how this shift in perspective can truly transform your life.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it valuable.
And until next time, keep those minds growing.
Thank you for listening. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the podcast is to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every bit of support helps us keep creating content that actually matters. See you in the next one.